right, thank you. I'll begin with a short introduction. I'm very thrilled to introduce Dr. Sue Carter. She's a professor of physics and is an associate dean of graduate studies at University of California, Santa Cruz.
So if you want to go to graduate school, visit Santa Cruz.
That's a big hit. Her bachelor's degree is from her hometown, as I understand, Kalamazoo College. And her PhD is where I got my PhD as well, the University of Chicago. She worked at AT&T Bell Labs and IBM Albany before her move to Santa Cruz. Her research has focused on thin film optoelectronics, but she serves in many roles, as we said, her associate dean and as a physics professor, but she's the chair of the UC Santa Cruz Center for the Innovation and Entrepreneurial Development. As we often talk about in this series, it's really nice to see physicists working at the interface of a couple different disciplines. She has launched 3 startups in fields such as photovoltaics to K-12 science education. And as we were talking about with Joe Ten, the originator of the What Physicists Do series, Sue spoke in this series last in 1999. And as we understand, her talk was the stuff that led to the company right up there, AdVision.
So I'll talk about that.
So let's put our hands together and give a warm welcome to Dr. Sue Carter.
Well, it's wonderful to be back here again. When Steve, I had so much great time last time that when Steve invited me, I was happy to come back. I love this area of California. And we had to look it up. It was 1999, and I was still an assistant professor at that time. And this was and so I want to talk about a little bit of how we go from being a physics professor to rolling out companies, because it might not be that obvious. But it all happenstance. This one happened because probably shortly after I gave that talk, or when I was giving that talk, someone came to me and asked me if I could consult on a lighting technology. They wanted to change their lighting technology. And lo and behold, this ended up being a company called AdVision, where they converted over to a technology I was working on that was licensed through UC Santa Barbara. And we figured out how to make, you guys ever heard of OLEDs, organic lighting diode displays? Yeah, well, we figured out how to make them with a screen printer, like the same way you make t-shirts. This company ended up getting bought out by Sumitomo, and hopefully you'll see, but to give you an idea how long it takes, this I think is just starting to make it in cell phones now. And then from here, I went to Selexit, which is a thin film. We made CAD-TEL, and we figured out how to make it. Anybody here work on nanoparticles? Little nano stuff? Okay. So, what we figured out is we start using, from a nanoparticle as opposed to a vacuum deposition, you can make things super, super smooth, which allowed us to make things a lot thinner than what was normal possible by vacuum deposition, and use this reel-to-reel type processing. So we did this company. The bottom fell out of the solar industry in California. I'll talk about in a little bit. And now this is a company called Seawater that makes equipment that makes solar cells. This is a company I'm going to talk about now that I'm working on. And then I'm not going to talk about my science academy, but this is more volunteer my time. But I try to give back to the community and trying to teach hands-on science to the whole homeschool community, and have a lot of love for that. So what do I mean by innovation and changing climate? And there's lots of different types of changing climates. This is one of my favorite graphs because it reminds us how much the climate has really changed on Earth over the last several millennia. So the area that I want you to focus on, so this is atmospheric CO2. This is average global temperature. And you should recognize that these numbers are very high, right? These black numbers. We've had areas where the atmospheric CO2 has been very high. And I want to look particularly at this Carboniferous period right here, because this is a very important, I got over here. This is a very important period on the history of Earth, because this is the period, you'll see that it started out very warm with relatively high parts per million of CO2, and it ended up very cold and parts per million of CO2 that's very comparable to what we have today. But during this period of time, this was when we had a whole bunch of, it was very warm and wet, and the parts per million of CO2 were very high. This is incredible for green leafy plants. And so we had very vast swampy areas with giant ferns that developed. This became all our fossil fuels most of it that we're drawing today. That's why it's called the Carboniferous period. But what's very important here is that we know halfway through this period there was a great rainforest collapse. We don't know exactly what caused it. We know that there was some tipping point where the climate completely changed. We know that there were mass extinctions. The levels fell. The levels of the ocean fell 100 meters. So if you're thinking, you can't have 100-meter changes in ocean level, we know that we've had that sort of change. So we ended up very, very cold at the end of this period. This also, of course, led to the rise of the reptiles, which later lead to the Jurassic period. So let's look at our changing climate now. Some people like to call this the Anthropocene, which basically means a new type of geological era, which is due to man causing the changes. This is highly debated still, but it's starting to gain some weight in the community. And these are types of pictures we're looking at. So this is the predictions of what the temperatures are going to look like by the end of the 21st century, depending on where we cap things out. I want to point that out that in certain cases it's going to be hot, right? Very, very hot, particularly at the poles, right, which is what's causing a lot of the rise. And then the other thing that's going to happen is, of course, our rainfall is to conserve quantity, but we change the distribution of where it falls. What basically happens is we get a lot more rainfall in the ocean. So we're basically taking our fresh water from land and moving it into the ocean, which is problematic. And there are certain areas, you can see Australia, parts of Africa, and lots of India that's going to be really, really dry, and that's a major concern for other people. This is what's going to happen to the San Francisco airport if we get about a 20-inch rise. We're probably going to get this. There's not much we can do about that. That's about a meter rise. So there's going to be some work on how to save the San Francisco airport. I just put this in to just show you if we had a similar rise, it would be the Carboniferous period in reverse. We'd lose Florida and Louisiana and most of the large portion of the East Coast. Okay, so we've got that changing climate happening. We also have this changing climate, and this is our population growth. So this is prediction out to 2050. These error bars are kind of our uncertainty. But what we know for sure is the population's increasing, and that certain areas, particularly Asia and Africa, are going to grow faster than many other areas. Okay, and this is important because if you look at the maps I show up later, a lot of the places in Asia and Africa are the ones that might see the biggest brunt to climate change also. So if you combine the population growth with the known climate changes going on, as well as our other pressures happening, you can actually look at something called the Food, Water, Energy Nexus and calculate what we need to plan for by 2030. So that's not very long from now. A lot of you guys will be, depending whether you go to graduate school or not, you'll be early on in your career. And these are the types of numbers you have to look at. We need basically about a 50% increase in energy production over what we're doing now. We need about a 50% increase in the food production over what we're doing now. And we need about a 30% increase in water production over what we're doing now. Okay, this becomes, and these things all compete with each other, so it becomes a very difficult situation that we're looking at moving forward. So understand why some of the difficulty is that there's inherent trade-offs. We can trade food for water and for energy. Here's an example of trading water and food for fuel. We all know this was a couple years ago. You might have, this is not the physics book. I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to change that. Sorry about that. But, so a couple years ago, you guys might have read the news about people starving because we were taking our cropland and converting it over to ethanol. There was the corn prices went right way up. You guys remember this on the news? And that partly was precipitated by the fact that we were converting it was cheap. You got more money by taking your corn and basically using it to create ethanol because of all the subsidies than you could get by growing it as food. So that's an example of how you could convert food to fuel. But also there's a water. So this is the amount of water that's embodied in, for example, a gallon of fuel. And you can see that if you go through the biomass method, corn particularly is bad, but you can have a huge amount of water embedded in each production of fuel you get out. So these are things that you have to look at when you're trying to figure out exchange of land for the exchange for food for fuel. Here's another example. This is a case where they basically are burning down a lot of the crops in order to make room for food production. Here is a picture of the palm oil plants. Ends up palm oil is one of the main materials for biofuels. So they basically, this is land that's being stripped of palms in Borneo area, Indonesia area, in order to basically convert palm oil into fuels. Okay. So that's one trade-off. Here's another trade-off. This is one where you're trading water for food for electricity. Here's an example of, I want to bring this up again because it's going to come back in the talk. These are areas where they're expecting particularly huge stress from water. You can see India is going to be in real trouble in parts of China as well as parts of Africa and the Midwest. And this is based on areas where they think there's not going to be enough water to create their agricultural needs. There's a lot of work now. People are now starting to, this is getting some controversy here, where people are putting sprayers on solar panels to be able to clean off their solar panels. This obviously takes a very clean technology then and makes it water wasteful by doing that. So that SunPower and various other people are getting a lot of flack for that, but it's needed in order to keep the power production out. And then this is something that else is happening. What people are doing is they're taking parts of the ag lands and just mapping it, basically covering it with solar panels. So this is a way where you're basically, you can generate your energy you need, but you're taking land out that you would be used for agriculture production. So you're trading energy for land. So the idea is, can we come up with technologies where you can balance all of them without exchanging one for the other? And that's one of the things we've been working on. So we know climate change and population growth will increase our demand for water, food, and energy resources. So the question is, what are approaches to take? And as a physicist, I've been thinking about this for a long time in terms of how can we balance it all out so that we can meet all these needs going forward by 2030. So the first thing you do is you look at the Earth's water budget, because that kind of gives you some idea of what you have to look at. And we all know from probably elementary school about the rain cycle, right? The condensation, precipitation, transpiration, condensation, precipitation. My daughter sings a song about this. She's in 5th grade. I hear it a lot, stuck in my head. Oh, I think it's evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Anyways, so we know this. So I want to focus, and some of this, 50% of the water that falls goes back into the soil, roughly. Okay, that we can recapture in the groundwater if we do well. 10% goes into runoff. That can be good or bad depending on where it runs off into. Usually it's bad because it brings contaminants, but this is in theory savable too. But this is the problem. Now, so 40% actually is transpiration off the leaves of the plants. Okay, it's just going up into the air, it's moving through the air, and it's falling someplace else. And in this case, a lot of it's falling in the ocean, right? So the question is, what can we do about the transpiration? And well, the answer to that's been around for many, many years, and it's called covered agriculture or greenhouses. And to give you an idea, this is the idea of how much comparative for the similar crop production. How many liters of water is used for agriculture if you compare it to open field production versus, say, a very nice greenhouse like what you have in Holland, which has plenty of water, so they don't need it as much, but still. And what you can see is that you basically drop your water consumption by over an order of magnitude, and maybe even considerably more than that, just by going into greenhouses. And the reason for that is the transpiration that comes off the leaves you can collect on the surface of the greenhouse, and then you can recycle it back down. In fact, most greenhouses now that go in have to recycle almost all of their water. That's starting to become requirements. Here's an advanced greenhouse in Saudi Arabia that takes tomatoes, and instead of needing 250 liters per kilogram to grow tomatoes, it only uses 3 liters per kilogram. Okay, so we know how to drop our water use for agriculture. Okay. But it involves going to these greenhouse structures. Also, I should say that not only do you do that, but you also increase your yields. In greenhouses, the increase in yields is about 4 to 10x versus what you can do in open field. Okay. Now the challenge, of course, of the greenhouses, if you heat them, they take energy. They're expensive. So how do we deal with that problem? One other thing I want to talk about very quickly. One other thing we're exploring right now, before I get into the technology we're working on, is we're also looking at these. There's been a big proposal for seawater greenhouses. In this case, you're watering your plants with salt water. You pile these things not too far from the ocean. You bring in deep seawater. You run it through, basically the fresh water evaporates, it collects on the roof, you come down and use it to water your plants. You then take the seawater and you dump it back into the ocean, the saltier water, dump it back into the ocean. Everybody says, oh, but you're taking this fresh water, you're taking out and dumping saltier water in the ocean, are you going to have much effect? The answer is no, because the amount you're dumping in is small compared to the ocean. And also remember, we're dumping fresh water into the ocean constantly right now because of the melting of the icebergs and stuff. So we're basically just taking that fresh water back out again. Okay, so that's one of these. This is a project that I'm not going to show you data on, but that's a project that we're just starting to contemplate on. So to understand what the technology we're doing now, we have to kind of understand a little bit about the Earth's energy budget also. And we all know that you have incoming solar radiation, you've got reflection off the surface. You've then, basically the problem with the greenhouse gases is you have back radiation, so it's a very complicated equation of how you balance the Earth's energy budget. But I want to look more in terms of this incoming radiation to see what I can do about that. And what you'll see is that this is the incoming radiation before and after you filter it through the Earth's atmosphere. Right? So this is what it is at sea level. And for the sun, this is just the black body diagram for the temperature of the sun. So this area here is the area of visible light. And about 40% of the sun's spectrum is in the visible light. Okay. But if you take the visible light, everybody assumes that plants kind of use, this is called the PAR spectrum, the photoactive spectrum of the visible spectrum. Everybody assumes plants kind of use this whole visible spectrum, but in fact they use very little of it. Plants only use a little bit of the reason why they're green, of course, is because they reflect green light, right? You all know that because you're physicists. And that happens to be where the sun peaks in its energy intensity. So basically, plants don't use most of the sun's energy. Okay, now you could ask why they're green, and I won't, that's a big biological debate. Some people claim it's because purple bacteria developed first and this chlorophyll came up around the purple bacteria. But in general, plants are not very efficient. They're very low efficiency use of the sun. Okay. So what that basically means is that it's very easy to basically have the same spectrum and use the same piece of land for plant production and power production, because the plants don't actually need that much light. But the key here is you need to play around with this 400 and 650. This 650 nanometer in particular is really important for crop production. And so we've been working on how to basically take out this area and enhance this area of the light. And to do that, we use a material called basically a modified version of a luminescent solar concentrator. So we take a material that is luminescent, we shine light on it, it's going to emit photons, it emits red photons at very high quantum yield, about 85%. Because of Snell's law, right, it totally internally reflects and waveguides down the side. And then for us, we couple it into a silicon photovoltaic cell. People typically put it on the edge. We put it in the front because it's much, your power efficiency is much higher if you do it that way. And so we lose some of the light, right? The waveguide isn't 100% efficient. It's about 70% efficient. So we lose 15% of the light out here up to the surface, but the 15% we lose down here is okay because it comes down and shines on the light and increases crop production. Okay. So this is so we built these things. It's standard silicon assembly. This is an example of a greenhouse with our panels, a test panels structure. We've now been able to test this in accelerated testing to last over 20 years. So basically what that means is we can use the same, this is out again, that's okay. We can use the same piece of land for both crop production and power production.
Dr. Carter, is
Yes.
this part of one of those spin-off, this is some of
This
your
is
work.
my third spin-off, soil culture.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it's from your background in thin films and thinking about optical properties.
Yep.
And it's, I have to follow, the red light is actually from a photoluminescence. You're not just taking the red photons from the sun, but you're taking all of the wavelength from the sun into the panels, and then they're glowing in this luminescent red light.
It's photoluminescent. It's a photoluminescent film that has it's a perylene, if you want to know what that is. It's a lumigen. But yeah, it doesn't absorb all the spectrum. It's pink because it absorbs green. Right? So it lets the red blue through. So this is basic physics. So I'm letting the colors of wavelength that the plants need through, and then enhancing the red wavelength the plants need. Yes.
Is this a test greenhouse someplace? Where is it?
This is a test greenhouse down in southern California, over near Santa Barbara. I'll show you. We have about. Let's see if I have some on the next slide. And here's some of our test greenhouses, right? So. Here's some at UC Santa Cruz's campus where we did a control, 2 greenhouses parallel control. We did one in a hydroponic system. This was going into apple. This is a system up in Edmonton, which is about 6 hours drive from the Arctic Circle. So very cold climate. I can't remember where this is, but you can see we've got them. And this is a 30 kilowatt system we installed down in Watsonville, California. Now, of course, farmers are skeptical a lot, so it took us quite a while to do enough trials to prove to them that we weren't actually hurting their plants, that we could put these red panels above them and not hurt their plants. So we did get through, but it took us probably 3 years of trials doing that. And nowadays, we don't cover the entire greenhouse. We only cover half of it. We only cover the west-facing roof. We leave the east with a normal light. Yeah?
Yeah, I have a question. The red areas are also making electricity?
The red areas are all making electricity, yeah. That's where the PV's integrated into it.
So the silk.
So everything that's red is our PV panels. So basically we made PV panels that are semi-transparent that basically allow plants to grow underneath them. So instead of being black, they're red.
Okay, so the light's actually going through the photovoltaic.
Yes. Yep. You can kind of, yeah. You can't really, this isn't high enough resolution for you to see our PV panels, but this is a PV panel. It's generating renewable electricity. It's about 8% power efficiency. It would be higher, of course, at local, but because we're letting a lot of light through for the plants, we balance it out.
Is it going to increase the fungus growth?
Hmm?
Is it going to increase the fungus growth because you are releasing the lower energy light into the plants? So you are getting rid of energy light like UVs.
Not enough UV to kill off fungal? You're talking about?
Oh, you're talking about the fungal? So we don't, our material we have doesn't absorb much of the UV. This is a very good question. The glass, unfortunately, does. And a big problem with greenhouses is the fact that you can get fungal growth because you're putting out UV. So there has been a lot of discussion of UV lighting to solve that problem. And I think that's a new area of research that we're working on that as well. We're also working at UV lighting. You know, UV LEDs have just become cheap enough now that you can start thinking about using them for water purification. Right, they were too expensive before in some of these big UV tubes. So we're also looking at UV LEDs for water purification. I'm not going to talk about that today, but that's a project we're working on. So why, so you could say, okay, Sue, this is cute. But you could just do this, right? Yeah. You could just put the PV panels right next to the greenhouse, fine, versus what we're doing. And the advantage we have are several cases. One, if you put the PV panels here, you're going to kill the plants where you're putting the PV panels. You're just taking some of your land out of production. In this case, you're not taking any land out of production. The other thing we have an advantage is that the greenhouse itself is our racking. So you need this big racking in addition to the PV panels. The greenhouse is our racking, so we basically just remove the racking from the cost of the panels, okay? And then we also have the red light that's coming out and enhancing, from the luminescent panels, enhancing the color that we needed for the plant growth. So this is the reason. And then the other reason right now that's helpful to us, okay, is that right now there's a 30% federal tax credit for installing PV panels, right? They count that on the greenhouse structure. So remember I said one of the problems you have right now is greenhouses can have less water and higher crop production per unit area, but they're too expensive, right? But now because our PV is part of the greenhouse structure, it's the racking, then we can sit right off the greenhouse structure as well. That 40% tax credit. And now it starts to become a little bit like attractive to people.
So,
Unfortunately, it's overly attractive to not necessarily the right type of growers, but that's okay.
so did you say the Lumo panels are 7% efficient for electricity?
Something like that. We can always put more PV coverage and less PV coverage, so we can control anywhere from 5% to 10%. It just depends on the crop that we use.
And how does that compare to the traditional panels?
Well, we start with, the traditional panels are 15%, something like that, 14 to 15%. You can get them up to 20%.
Okay.
But remember, we're putting ours, the area efficiency is very important. So most panels are spaced. So even though they're higher efficiency per panel because they're spaced out, the area efficiency, ours aren't spaced at all, they're solid. The area efficiency is about the same. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, the area.
It's the area, over the whole, if you actually calculate the power efficiency of most PV farms, they're actually only about 5 to 8% efficient because the panels themselves are 14% efficient, but they space them out.
They haven't optimized the area.
Well, they have to space them out for, I'm not sure exactly which to get, for the stability of the tracking or to get things to come.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one thing we're working on. The other thing we want to discuss is this idea, okay, so you got PV, but you need storage. And, I like batteries, I really do, but really by far the best storage we have is fuel. Energy per unit mass, there's nothing better than fuel. So a lot of people are looking at ways in generating biofuels. The problem is biofuels take lots and lots of land, which fights with food. In fact, you can see that if you wanted to power the United States vehicles, this is how much land you'd have to put into corn. Okay, but if you can look at the energy intensity, and you go back to what created a lot of our fossil fuels in the first place, it ends up that algae looks very attractive. And algae, remember now, this is popping up, toxic algae is popping up all over the place. It ends up as CO2 levels get higher. Algae loves it, right? So the question is, we think of this as a bad thing, but can we actually use it for a positive thing? So, there's a lot of downsides. What is it? Of course, it's very expensive. It gets contaminated easy. Algae grows about 10 times faster than anything else. So one little thing can cause the whole thing to go a mess. And it also has huge water requirements. So that question is, but then we thought, well, if we could put it in our greenhouses, we could potentially solve that problem, right? Because we relieve the contamination and we relieve the water usage. So we did some work with NASA Ames. This is with Lee Bebot and Angela Detwell are there. She actually just looked at lots of different algae species, but her thesis, it was unpublished, basically showed that this specific type of algae didn't work all through most of the visible spectrum, but then its photosynthesis peaked over in this red. So it looked like the red light was going to be attractive to this. So we did a lot of studies, both in these little mini raceways and up in these troughs. And what we basically learned, these were different intensities of how much of the light we filtered out. So this is low filtration, this is high filtration. And what you can basically see is we increased, it's within the error bars, but if anything, we didn't hurt the algae at all by putting in these screens. And in some sense, putting our PV panels in some sense above, in some sense, we might have helped a little bit. Yeah.
May I clear this up for myself? Is control then like totally unfiltered light? And so if you're getting bars that are equivalent to that, you're saying you can grow them under your luminescent red photovoltaics.
That's right. Without hurting the plants, right? Yeah, we do. I will tell you that I didn't bore you with all the strawberry and flower data. We've got a lot of data on all sorts of different plants. So that's one of the attractive futures to biofuels, although right now we're still in the very early stage of investigating that. The fact that oil is as cheap as it is makes anything related to biofuels not doable right now. And the other thing we're now just starting to work on is one of the really nice things about, well, really bad things, but also good things, is when things get hotter, all of a sudden, so solar cooling becomes more efficient. So the higher you have your temperatures, the more efficient you can make solar absorption to work. And it's usually been not a very good technology But now that you're looking at 50 degrees Celsius temperatures in India, right? You're starting to think, oh, well, we can get, we might be able to get. I'm not kidding. They've had days above 40 Celsius and 50 up to 50 Celsius. So now all of a sudden, cooling becomes one of the biggest, air conditioning becomes one of the biggest problems that we're facing in a lot of areas. And so if we can get solar absorption chiller heaters to work more efficiently, that's a potential market. And we've been looking at this in terms of doing it in our greenhouses, because the greenhouses, the panel today, gives us an extra temperature boost on top of that. So we can get all these temperature boosts in for the solar chiller. We can operate that more efficiently and use it for air conditioning. It's kind of it's not intuitive that making things hotter is better for air conditioning, but it is in this case. So basically what I'm going to argue is if you can use these power integrated greenhouses to kind of get you in this balance between food, water, and energy with this 50 to 30% to hit these 50% numbers. I'm just going to briefly mention, but I haven't talked about this impact on climate change, right? Because ideally, right, you really want to. This is a response to what's going on, but it doesn't actually do anything about climate change. Because the amount of PV panels we're talking about installing here might not be enough to, might have enough to impact climate change. And I want to just bring this up very briefly. This is not something I'm working on, but I think you should be aware of it because it's happening kind of in your backyard. There's Marin has a big carbon farming project, and I'm sure it'll be moving up throughout more of California, where they basically can show that the carbon, we basically underestimated how much carbon can be actually stored in the soil. And so there's a carbon farm plan where people are trying to actually recover and farm carbon. And this is the potential across the world for sequestering carbon. We know right now that the carbon in soils is a lot lower than it was, say, 80 years ago. We've been removing carbon out of the soils. The question is, how do we actually fix it back in? And you can see that in some areas of the country, there's actually quite a big amount of land available for us to sequester carbon. Not so much in California. You can't see California's kind of squeezed in there, but there's also areas in California. It ends up that one of the big uses of excess CO2 is in greenhouses, right? People pump a lot of greenhouses into greenhouses to enhance plant growth. You can see here that the rice goes up quite a bit, up to about 400-800 parts per million. You get much higher plant growth. This is just dry ice hanging from buckets. This may be a marijuana plant. No, I guess not. Where they're just letting the steam down to increase the plant growth. So plants can uptake much higher CO2 levels than we're happy when we can usually deal with. One of the problems, though, with doing this, you can say, okay, great, then CO2 is going up, plants are going to grow better, life is good. One of the problems with this is if you do it in this open area, non-enclosed area, this is the problem. It ends up insects also really benefit from high CO2 levels. If you look back in the Carboniferous Period, you'll see that we had very gigantic insects back there. If you look at all the fossils, right? So you can't so if you increase CO2, you're also going to cause insect infestations to go way up. So one of the arguments, if you do this in an enclosed atmosphere, then that's a way to keep the insects down without needing insecticides. And of course, you've seen the cow picture, right? Collecting the methane gas. Methane's a real problem, right? Because it's a much worse gas than CO2, right? You get 21 pounds of CO2 equals 1 pound of methane is 21 pounds of CO2. And the prediction is that they're going to catch up soon. So we're keeping our eye on CO2, we're sometimes losing our eye on methane, and it could be potentially as big a problem. So there's and that's one of the reasons why meat and stuff have a hard carbon footprint is related to other gases that are non-CO2. So if you can figure out a way to use covered areas, there may be some potential there. There's these big methane farms actually sprouting up now for collecting methane gases. So you can do that. I like to do my math. So you do the math, and you can calculate just looking at cropland, this is not looking at the amount of land we have, just our land that we currently are growing crops in. It's about 8.5 billion acres. So that gives you 500 terawatts of power potential at a very low number of 15 watts per meter squared. Remember, the sun is 1,000 watts per meter squared. I've derated it quite a bit for the efficiency of the panel and the fact that the sun doesn't shine all the time. So you can basically figure out if you just take existing cropland and cover a little bit under 10% of this, or a little bit over 10% of this land with these gigantic things, that would produce enough that would provide the world's electricity and heating and cooling needs. It would also allow you to increase food production by 40% while reducing fresh water consumption by at least 10%. So this is so the numbers do actually kind of pan out in these 10% type of numbers. This, by the way, the greenhouses in Almeria, Spain. It's so big you can see it from space. It's also one of the few places undergoing cooling right now because I got so much reflection right now. But this is they provide almost all the fruits and vegetables in the teeny corner of Spain for most of Europe. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm just curious, what are the economics on that if you were to replace traditional food production with greenhouses? How do they compare?
Depends dramatically on which greenhouse is used. In some cases, like tomatoes and cucumbers, it's cheaper to do greenhouses. That's why all these
Does
crops.
that include like harvesting costs and things like that?
Pardon?
I was thinking like harvesting costs might increase for a greenhouse versus an open field.
Well, harvesting's cheaper in greenhouses because you grow a lot more density per unit area and stuff seems to be higher up. So one of the problems they're having right now, especially with strawberries, is they're lower down. There's lots of physical crippling problems with picking strawberries. So people are talking about moving to greenhouses just because it'll make it much better for the growth pickers to pick at like waist level as opposed to down the ground. So harvesting, so there's some things that's almost all your tomatoes and almost all your cucumbers are greenhouse grown right now. You know, the other crops haven't quite taken off yet, and I think that there's still more research to be done there. Yeah.
What is the cost of the actual panel, the photovoltaic slash?
So our cost right now, installed, is somewhere on the order of $2 a watt, something like that. That's installed.
$2
A watt installed.
Oh, and how many square feet is that?
Oh, well, let's see, so you've got about, say, 80 watts per meter squared. So, I'm not sure, $2 a watt. I mean, that's
$116 per meter squared.
Yeah.
$14,000 for like 5 kilowatts.
It's about comparable to what you pay for the standard. I mean, there's within 10 or 20%. Yeah.
All of these things make me think of the when we talk about battery solutions or so on. It's the rare earths that are a concern, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this we're talking about, you know, silicon dioxide, right? I mean, and you know, what is the feasibility of the earth being populated by greenhouses? At some level, it seems like if it's as simple as glass, and obviously you're talking about the PV material. But I haven't even looked at this in terms of PV. I think more in terms of storage. You brought up ideas of biofuels and all of these things. But just in terms of you know, the ability of humanity to mine and work with the materials. Can we build an algae farm the size of Arizona? Can we?
Yeah, the question is, so the PV is silicon, right? We're using silicon PV. We add to the efficiency by about, so one of the questions to ask is, we're taking, so the original idea was okay, silicon's energy intensive, right? And it's expensive, so let's take, so we can double the efficiency of silicon cells because we're coupling this luminescent light that's waveguided into the PV cell. So we need less PV cell per unit, less area PV for power production. That worked really, really well until the market fell out of PV, and then it became less of an attraction to cut down the amount of PV. But we can do that. We can decrease the amount of PV per unit power.
These are the waveguides, basically,
the
so you don't need as much PV material.
And you don't need glass. You can do it on acrylic acrylics or PVC. Right now, PVC is more expensive. Plastics are more expensive than glass. Glass is really cheap. There's no reason why you can't make a waveguide for stuff that is in glass. Right? You guys all know that, right? You know, that would be a really good number. I've never taken this that someone's going to install these all over the place, right? But that's a really good question. You're basically talking about plastic organics or plastics or silicon are the main components. There are no rare elements.
Right. None of these. I mean,
None of these have rare elements. Yeah, the algae, you know, used to be covered with algae, right? Yeah.
California, we have a chronic problem of water, and then large portion of the energy is used for moving the water and pumping the water filtrations. And then do we want to increase the agriculture through the greenhouse to generate the energy? Doesn't make sense, is it?
Well, the greenhouse saves all your water, so you're saving tons amount of energy by not having to pump water, right? Right. The whole point is that the water in the greenhouse is recoverable, so you're not.
Where original water could come somewhere, right? So you need to have initial use of the water, even though after you're using a certain amount of the water, we are going to pay. We are not going to have water out of nothing because we are using our greenhouse.
Right, but right now, if you took the land that's now currently open field, you took the same amount of water, you could grow and put a greenhouse there. You could grow, 10 times as much crop with the same amount of water than being open field. So you'd actually consume less water in California, not more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
okay.
more of an energy question. How much energy, what does it compare for pumping the water to a standard farm versus or bringing the water to one of your greenhouses with say you bring the same amount of water, get the same amount of energy to move that water, but then your PV panels only produce a certain amount of electricity, so like how much energy are you wasting?
Well, you could put the greenhouse where the farm is. Right, you could put it right where the farm is, right? I guess I'm confused about, right, so the greenhouse doesn't have to go anyplace else. It could be where the farm currently is.
I just
Well, aren't you having like from the ocean, water comes in?
Oh, you're talking about the seawater greenhouses. That's a different technology, okay? We're not doing that right now. Yeah, that would be a concern with the seawater
I
greenhouse.
was in general, I thought that we are concentrating too much energy and not the energy. Our effort to the agriculture in California because we have to actually produce the energy, and then if you want to produce energy, you need to put a lot of energy from the power company.
Right.
So it is like a cycle from one place to another.
Right, so the whole point of this is to decrease that significantly by not having to pump as much water and to grow a lot more crops using the water. That's the whole point. So we could basically decrease the amount of ag land in California by a lot, decrease our water usage and grow the same amount of crops we're growing now. And decrease our usage. But it's based on this idea that greenhouses use 10 times less water and more crop production. If you don't believe that, then that's a problem, yeah.
So right now, can you go to a farmer and say if this will make sense economically? Or only if it's...
No, because we can, because we don't have the data for all the crops, right? Right now, because of what's going on right now is, to be honest with you, the marijuana growers are taking over everything. So it's really hard to get around the cannabis growers at this stage and junction.
Is this something they're interested in?
Oh gosh, yes. Right? But we're not really. I mean, cannabis does use tons of water.
Yeah.
So in theory, if you could actually reduce the amount of water by sticking it in a greenhouse, that would be good. But right now they don't care. They don't care about wasting water and energy. So, I mean, right now people are thinking about putting stuff. Just to give an idea, people are thinking about growing things inside warehouses, right? Which you're not going to save much water, because you're not going to get the condensation of the glass, and using artificial lighting, which also makes no sense because, even though LED lights are efficient, you're still not using the sun's spectrum. So people are talking about going to that whole extreme of growing things inside warehouses. The sun gives us a lot of energy. My view is that we should take advantage of it. Yeah.
The question was, are these things economically feasible? in one modality, and I haven't, to be honest, I'm more interested in the science and some aspects of the public policy. I have not looked into the pros and cons of something like a carbon tax. But if a society, and some have put forward, and there are parts of the world where carbon taxes are there, it changes the economics of your use of power. It's changing this nexus and saying, okay, we've gotten this free ride in some ways because we're using this embedded, power saved in the earth. And now we're going to say that's going to be more expensive. I would imagine something like this could become more economically feasible. You were talking on the bottom dropping out of PV, but if
Yeah, so the problem right now with PV is not the cost, it's the storage, right? And the fact that there's also a lot of environmental regulations because they're still sitting there and sticking them in deserts and they're sticking them over cropland and they're causing things to fall away with an act. And there's the Fresno Farm Bureau was suing farmers because they were taking their land and converting it over to PV farms. They figured out they could make more money. The problem is the storage. Right now, we're getting so much PV installed in California in particular that, we can't even run our PV plants necessarily at full tilt because some certain times of day we're producing too much power in certain areas, right? So that's going to become an increasingly problem. You can use demand response and stuff like that to try to solve that problem, but that's only going to get you so far. So I think that at some point, we're going to have to look seriously at the energy storage problem. And there's lots of potential solutions out there, but I keep on going back that our best energy storage solution is still fuels, right? And there are lots of other ideas of how to create fuels. This is just not, using LG is just one of them. There are lots of other ways of creating liquid fuels. Okay, I am not going to get anywhere close to the end of my talk, so I'm going to maybe, okay, but the point is this is just some solutions, right? And my job is really to come up with, is kind of maybe give you some ideas of some things we're thinking, but really the solutions are really going to come from the students later. So that's kind of really my concern, is how do I help, students transition some of their ideas into solutions. I want to give you an idea of why I think this is a good time period for you guys to be doing this. This is a Bending the Curve report that came out of the University of California, which basically showed, basically predicted how high the temperature was going to rise depending on what changes we did. And you probably should know that all the University of Californians are trying to be carbon neutral. Frankly, I don't really get the point, but I get the point, but emissions are global, so we should be working on helping everybody get carbon neutral, not really focusing on our own campus. So this is the Bending the Curve report. You can read it online. It has a whole bunch of ideas of how to bend it. But the point is, I want you to say that we're looking at least 2 degrees. We're trying to figure out how to stay between 2 degrees and 3 degrees is probably might be happening. So the question is how long, and we know this is going to happen in the next 30 or 40 years. So the question is how does it take something from the invention stage to the deployment stage? And this is, I'll show this really quickly.
Turning sunlight into electricity. Bell Laboratories at Murray Hill, New Jersey demonstrate a solar battery which converts light into power. A small amount, yes, but a big first for science. It's a simple device made of strips of silicon, principal ingredients of ordinary beach sand. Enough light from a lamp to power this toy Ferris wheel. Lights on, she works. Lights off, the motor stops.
So this is, of course, was the discovery of the silicon solar cell, 1954. I want you to pay attention to the date. Okay, how long did it take silicon to start being mainstream? This is actually this is a graph of the cost of photovoltaic modules. What was the first application of silicon? You guys know silicon solar cells?
Space.
Space, yeah, space. In fact, it went from 1954 in the lab to which was it Victoria? Wasn't Sputnik, it was right after. It started with a V. Anyways, it went into
Vanguard.
Vanguard. It went, I think, into Vanguard because the Soviet satellites kept on falling out of the air and crashing after a month because their batteries ran out. NASA came and approached Bell Labs. They said, let's try PV panels. They got them up in the air. They thought that they would last a year. They lasted a decade. So it's one of the big success stories of moving something from the lab into a product very quickly. But this is what's happened with PV module prices. You can see 1954, 1977, it was still very expensive. But now it's down here around 36 cents. This is called Solar Profits Last Dance. This caused about 50 or 100 companies to go bankrupt. And what enabled this was that the Chinese had figured out back here that the real problem was the silicon supply. They made a gamble back in 2000 before anybody thought PV would be useful for anybody. They made a gamble to basically move up the production of silicon, single crystal silicon. It's a material supply problem. And it paid off, right? Well, except for the fact that they dropped the price so much, a lot of them went out of business also. It is an amazing story. This is wind power. Wind power, I just want to discover the first wind turbine is 1888. Okay? First wind turbine that generated electricity. The modern wind turbines aren't all that different. I mean, their design is better, but frankly, the basic invention concept is the same. And it took, and this is what happened to wind power in a similar time period to solar. You'll see a similar, very dramatic decrease. This is, we could go through this quickly. This is the LED light industry. This happened much quicker than either silicon or wind. There was large fights between, actually this was actually fairly, Nakamura of course won the Nobel Prize for this, but that actually was a fairly short transition from invention to discovery. And this is lithium-ion batteries. Okay, I should point out that most of these people are physicists. Okay, these are all physicists doing this. These are all physicist inventors. Okay. Goodenough is one of the most famous material scientists. He actually discovered the main material that makes batteries possible. And he's 92, 94 now, and still working on it. Right? Still working on next generation batteries. So they also went into production very, very quickly. Had a drag down fight with MIT though, which was kind of bloody. But so I just want to give you an idea. Normally, how long it takes from invention to application. Silicon PV was over 50 years before we really saw it. Modern wind turbines, depending on how far you want to go back, it's about 20 years. It's only recently LED lighting and lithium-ion battery that we've been able to have much lower, and that's partly because there's been a lot bigger drive need to do that because we're starting to see the impacts of climate change. We're starting to pass laws that make it easier for these type of technologies to make it. So why is 20 years important? I want to remind you why 20-year delay is important, because a 20-year delay between when something's invented, between when it gets to production, is a 1-degree temperature rise. Right? If it takes us 20 years, we're going to have a 1 degree Celsius temperature rise. So we can't afford, there's going to be a 1 meter rise in sea level over that 20 years, and increased drought, etc. So you're kind of in an area that we have to do this now. What that allows you to do is having kind of an emergency situation allows you to kind of shorten the time period from invention to application, as this diagram shows. I'm not going to go, I can't go through my whole talk because I don't have enough time, but let me show you one more thing and then I will get to the end.
The leading southern flank of the Butte Fire blowing up as down canyon winds start to move a sea of sparks and flame.
You guys have
here.
become familiar with this?
San Andreas, where this fire is continuing.
This is a fire that happened over in the Butte Fire that happened over near San Andreas. It was near the Valley Fire.
100 square miles. At mid-evening, the flames again burning uphill, cutting off this road.
So the reason why I show you this is this becomes actually an interesting opportunity. So in 2015, the Butte Valley fires were over $2 billion in damage. Okay, 1,300 homes, 2,000 structures destroyed. That's our house, right here. My house that my husband and I built when we were assistant professors. And one of the 500 homes that got lost up in the foothills. This is now what's happening. We couldn't get our house rebuilt because we did. We finally are getting it rebuilt now. But we tried to actually get our permit to rebuild through the county. We couldn't because they were processing over 1,000 cannabis permit applications. This is a place that has 35,000 people. Okay, the entire county has 35,000 people, and they're processing 1,000 cannabis applications. Okay, And they get 5,000 each. The county gets 5,000 each for each of those. They only get 3,000 to process my permit for my house, which is much more complicated, right? So I finally got it through, but they had to send it to Sacramento to get my permit through. But the point is, this is a lot of money that's being pumped into the ecosystem for us to rebuild in a more sustainable manner. Tons and tons of insurance money. I'm not going to go into Sierra Nevada. That's not important. So one of the things, but one of the problems we're having then is these drought fires and innovation is that this is a very interesting thing because we've got millions of acres, thousands of homes, and billions of dollars being pumped in to try to figure out how we do this in a better way moving forward. And particularly, one of the things I'm interested in is how do we regrow all these lands that we've lost to fire. And I realized, in particular, I want to understand, well, what do we grow that takes less water, sucks up more CO2, fixes that CO2 in the land? And I realized, since you guys are working on this, this is something that you could probably solve. That we can't do it easily because we don't know how much CO2 is being uptaken and released on an individual species level as the plant changes its growth pattern. So we're looking at, and right now, this little $15,000 to $40,000 piece of instrument is what we're using to basically look at CO2 uptake and release. So one of the challenges I've been trying to understand is how can we then make a very, very cheap system that allows us to look at carbon uptake and water transpiration on plants so that we can basically do very informed local land management to basically replant in a more sustainable manner than what we've done in the past. So it's a nice, fun project. My undergraduates are working on it. And I love working with undergraduates. This is a formula slug. They wanted hands-on projects. This is one of many teams that has lots of physicists involved. They went out, and to give you an idea what the power of the students can do, they went out and got 1,000 signatures saying that UCSU should more actively support on-campus extracurricular organizations in pursuit of relevant hands-on engineering projects, but clearly a lot of applied physics projects are. We only have probably 1,500 STEM students or 2,000 engineering and STEM majors. So this was half the student body. They collected signatures to say what they wanted, and we also got a bunch of dedicated staff and friends. And together we've been working to get them the facilities they need because right now they have no access to places to do hands-on stuff. So. This is the S Lab. I'm mentioning this just because this is one of the projects we're building. You're building a maker space. We're building something called the Sustainability Lab. Give you an idea of some of the student projects. This is one of them.
Hi, I'm Kelly, and this is Formula Slug.
It's being built in my lab right now.
We are trying to build an electric vehicle in under 6 months for the FSAE competition in Lincoln, Nebraska.
We are an interdisciplinary group of students working to innovate renewable energy technologies. We have cultivated a strong team dedicated to research, development, and production of these technologies.
Not only do we plan on building this vehicle, but we hope to provide this project as an educational platform to give students the opportunity to apply their diverse knowledge in real-life applications.
That's my lab. You can see I've got an old Tesla magnet up there. You can tell it's in a physics lab. Right? I got a little electromagnet here. But these students have independently, they're self-financing themselves. They actually, through crowdfunding and stuff, and they've raised $30,000 on their own, without my help, just to do these hands-on projects. They're building an electric race car that'll be powered, charged by PV systems. And there's lots of other projects going on like that. I'm not going to go into this. iGEM, they're basically figuring out how to make a sugar substitute from ag waste, and they just raised $23,000. So these students are self-funding a lot of their projects. This is what the S Lab is for us. It's a facility. We provide mentorship, training, and our lab is 2 fume hoods, that glove box, materials, device fabrication, etc. We have a machine shop we're putting together right now from donated machines. This is all kind of self-funded off my carbon fund. We have, and then in addition to that, we have those 2 greenhouses I built for demos for my project. I'm turning those over to the students for their own little microgrid to do their own little urban gardening projects. There we have a aquaponics system going there. There's some fish back here. This is a bad picture of me. This is these are the 2 pictures there. So anyways, my job, what I've really been passionate about right now is, I've done this a few times now, and to really help students work on getting their dreams realized to help us build more sustainability moving forward. So I think that there's a lot of excitement, a lot of, I didn't have time to go over this, but kind of the message I want to get across is this is a great time. Climate change provides a great environment for innovation because it basically puts in a lot of policies and a lot of personal stories and a lot of money, $2 billion in fire damage, right, that can help speed the transition from the idea stage into an actual commercial market. And that really, I think that I hope to still contribute to this world. I think it's really the students that are going to be driving our transition towards this future. So encouraging everybody who's interested in this type of technology and also wants to get into how to make a sustainable business. I'm happy to help you do that. Okay. Thank you.
We have the room until 5:15. I do know some students have a busy class schedule and need to leave. If you're going to leave so quickly and quietly right now, and the rest of us are staying for a question session until 5:15. Step outside for any of these students, and the rest of us, I don't know, I will do that after the go ahead. We're going to continue with questions now.
Yes.
Just to clarify, you talked about, I believe, doing vacuum deposition of nanomaterials and printing. And I was wondering which technique you were using for these solar cells?
Yeah, so the stuff I showed earlier was solution deposited in nanoparticles,
Okay.
not vacuum deposited, and then you print them. So that's why they need to be so they're in liquid.
Okay.
They're like nanowaves. For this, we use an organic dye, and originally we were just dissolving in solution with it's a PMMA. We're using PMMA as a matrix and squeezing it. But now we just give the dye to the manufacturer who extrudes these large sheets, and we just laminate the luminescent sheet onto the glass. So it's basically, we use exactly the same materials used in silicon processing. We just embedded into it.
Yeah, the diagram on the right is glass tin oxide. And then
oh yeah, this is actually a different solar cell. This is a solar cell, but not this is just a pink a plastic sheet that's very thin. That's laminated. We just use a laminator. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question properly last time.
I just a little background on this one. I probably know better. Do we have any recycling plan for the solar panel? I mean, PV panel.
Silicon lasts for over 50 years, so it hasn't been something that's discussed a lot by silicon.
But the growth of the installation has been boom less than 10 years. If you wait 30 or 40 years from now, everybody's gonna be put out there.
Right. Yeah. I should say that the silicon will still work. It'll just be lower efficiency. So the question is how to recover the silicon. The silicon is you could probably re-crush it and melt it back down again and make silicon again. But I don't know about that. We haven't had anything long enough in the field. It's been a bigger issue with cadmium. So cadmium telluride, they're very concerned about this use. The glass, it'd be like the same as how you it'd be the same way of how you recycle normal glass. There's a lot of
these chemically treated, so you cannot be just using like a regular glass with plastic silicone, right?
No, this is just normal glass.
Oh, you don't. I'm talking about just like the PV panel.
the PD panel is just silicon, there's no glass. It's just silicon, it's just PN junction. It's, it's got some boron and phosphorus in it. It doesn't have any toxic chemicals. To make the material, you use silane, which is toxic. But the materials themselves, as far as I know, don't have any toxic chemicals. A lot of other solar cells do, like cadmium, telluride, and SIGs, have toxic elements. Silicon is pretty weird. Yeah, you dope it with phosphorus and boron and make an injection. Yeah. But it doesn't have any toxic elements in it. But to make it, you take toxic elements. I don't want to make it sound like it's but the silicon itself is not toxic. Don't eat it though. Yeah.
So you had on one of your slides, it showed the places on the Earth where you could sequester carbon. What determines that?
This is areas where they have monitored the soil and there's lower carbon than they expect. That is that instead of being at 20%, I don't know exactly what the numbers are. It depends on the area, but they know kind of historically from doing that deeper the soil stuff what carbon they saw the soil collect in the past, and they did pores. And then we look at the surface and say, oh, the surface is depleted on what is here and so we know that. And they're going back like 80 years. So I think it's just based on that. Like what we think we should be able to store it. Yeah, I know what plot you're talking about. There's a big project in Marin called the Carbon Farming Project. You're talking about this graph.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't have a color, does that mean they just didn't test there? Because I can see maybe the Sahara, okay. But what about the whole Midwest? Why isn't, the prairie, why isn't that a place you could put carbon? It doesn't make
I have
sense.
no idea. I have no idea. I don't know how they got the, some areas don't have color. I don't know if I'm going to use that. It does seem weird. My guess is related to how much they think they can sequester based on the current carbon levels of that soil.
Maybe this has to do with actual growing crops, places where they could do it easily. You're not going to just go in the middle of nowhere and dairy carbon. Good.
Right.
But these are places where you can modify your agriculture system to do it.
Right, but why would you be able to do that in the Midwest?
Yeah, I don't understand why the Midwest and the prairie is on this. And I understand the desert in Australia, the desert in Africa.
Yeah, it is a question. I don't know the answer why.
What you look at, what you see here is that where they show it is where people are growing crops. That's where all the crops are being grown. Where people grow the food that we eat now.
I still thought they were grown from the little west.
No, we're not. Most of the food's grown in the east, just like it shows.
Yeah, I know. I'll have to look at this more. Now you've intrigued me. I'll have to look at this more. Yes.
I have a related question. Does that mean that the sequestering of carbon would actually increase production of crops, like the carbon that's in the soil?
Probably not. I mean, the idea is you don't want it to go into the food if you want to keep it sequestered. So, our carbon, our CO2 gets sucked up by the ocean, gets sucked up by soil. And so if you can get that sucked up more, then we can basically bring it in balance. So that's the argument is that the ocean seem to be taking as much as they can. In fact, in some cases, too much is why we have transportation problems, right? But the soils, we still haven't actually, some people argue we haven't actually maximized the ocean consumption of the soil. And that can be a big enough number that it might help us bring these in balance. Yeah. So right now, we're not going to, despite the X prize, I don't think anybody's going to take a vacuum cleaner and start vacuuming the CO2 out there. There are people out there that think they can, but if we can get plants to do it naturally for us, replanting our forests and yeah.
Would you say that the PV greenhouses are ready for scaling up now? And if so, how do you get them to scale up?
Yeah, we can make them now big enough. The thing I kind of washed over quickly is it's basically the same thing as PV manufacturing. We have to dice the cells. So we don't take an entire 12.5 centimeters wafer, because we did that in guava. It would cause shading on the plants and fans. We actually dice them into strips, and then we solder the strips together to make the panels. And it ends up the dicing tool is problematic. It's a $500,000 tool, and only one person has it. It's in San Jose. And so we have an order for $1 million order in Ohio. Right now, we're limited by our production capacity. It's hard for us to meet that $1 million order. So it'll take us like 6 months to build the panels for that $1 million with our current manufacturing process. So we can do it cheap enough, we just don't have the volumes. So we have to buy another tool. It'd be about probably $1 million to $2 million of investment in infrastructure.
Dr. Carter, is that as ironic as I thought? You know, like all this work and tooling to make the and construction to make the silicon, crystalline silicon so large, and then you really just need it in strips.
I need strips. Yeah. So if we had, it used to be that there was an old technology from Evergreen that they made silicon in strips, and it was actually too expensive for them to stack it up, and so the technology failed. For us, it would have been perfect. But that company hadn't failed in 2012, and it was now available now. We have exactly what we needed, but they failed in 2012. So, yeah, it's too bad. Yeah, we only need like, right now we're doing 3 millimeter strips, kind of centimeter the ideal for us. Yeah. Sometimes it's just bad timing. I will point out, I would like to say that all my companies, I have never made like a big buyout. Right? Now, granted, I'm a professor, so I've only been paying some time in there. I'm not the main person. But, it's all been okay, but nothing's been like, no IPOs. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed it, and it's been a good experience. And something to look forward to. Yeah.